I've been with DATPROF for about 2.5 years now. Prior to that, I've worked in the test data provisioning marketplace since 2003, predominantly on data masking projects. So I've helped several hundred companies adopt data masking practices around the world. My job is to work with the DATPROF international client base, introduce the software, take clients through proof of concepts, train them, and get them established using DATPROF Privacy, DATPROF Runtime, DATPROF Subset. So that's a little bit about me. The title of this is, well, it came about because I did a presentation to a user group a few weeks ago, and I was rationalizing in my mind what goes on during the process of creating a test environment. And a couple of thoughts came sort of in and out, and I'm going to touch on those as we go along. Before I go anywhere, who has either managed or done a data masking, anonymization, we'll use that word, practice? Hands up if you've done it. All right, so roughly half-ish, I think. Okay. So my objective is to probably then take those of you that have put your hands up and make you slightly better test data engineer. The way we're going to do that is we're going to have a look at some of the new things that are in DATPROF Privacy that's been in there for the last 12 months, over the last 12 months or so. And we'll talk about evolving a masking project. Test data engineering then. We're going to cover who or what, and we're going to look at engineering test data, turning it around the other way, not just being a test data engineer. A test data engineer then, arguably, is one who engineers test data. Okay, that's fair enough. However, what kind of role does it? There is a role called test data engineer. We see that a lot, typically in the very large companies. But in the smaller organizations, it tends to be done by DBA, by QA, by testers, by developers sometimes as well. So it's quite a broad mix of skills that do this thing which we're calling test data engineering. Test data engineering is about delivering an anonymized data content, databases in a microservice architecture to that end user community, which is development, test, QA, train, those that are using the lower environments. We use that expression. So that's kind of setting the stage a little bit. You've already got interactive with each other doing Q&A type things. And that's a critical part of the whole process. One of the things that we have at DATPROF is a planning document. When we are interviewing our users, asking them how do you use your databases in non-production, what kind of data content do you want to see? Because you need to be bringing all of this together in a realistic way. Your resulting anonymized database must be credible, must be usable. The data integrity needs to be addressed and maintained. The referential integrity needs to be addressed and maintained. The database needs to look, feel, smell, touch, and taste just like the production database. And if you can get it like that, then you've won. You've achieved your objective. Now, there are times, I've had times where I've done an anonymization exercise, and the guy, my sort of project sponsor, would say, it looks too real. And that's exactly what we want. We want it to look real. So that means that as we're going along and we're doing our planning, we need to be thinking about bringing that data together. And that's what this slide's about here. We go looking for stuff that's going to do the job for us. And sometimes our own database is the source. Use our own data content. Within DATPROF Privacy, for instance, Shuffle. That uses your own data content as a replacement candidate. You talk to your teams. How do you use this? What kind of content do you want to see in these fields? Give me some examples. And that then feeds a set of seed files effectively. So you're thinking all the time about making it look real. What do we need to exercise in terms of special character support, in terms of the content, the width of the data items, things like that. We bring all of these together. Now, a lot of this is down to planning. If we start at the beginning, why are we doing it? This word anonymization gets used. We use it. We don't use tokenize. We don't use encrypt. We don't use anything like that at all. We use the word anonymization, which is the replacement of data in situ in the database, using like-for-like content, which is what we're going to be talking about. And this is the real reason why we do it, is GDPR. Now, people talk of GDPR and saying GDPR compliance. Well, the fact of the matter is, if you anonymize a database properly, GDPR does not apply to it anymore. This here, recital 26, is one of the supporting items. In GDPR, you've got the articles itself, and then you have what's called recitals that support it. They describe what the articles are trying to say. And recital 26 specifically says the principles of data protection do not apply to anonymized data. So that's what we're in it for. That's our game. We're going to be anonymizing this database. Okay. I kind of live by this. Having done it so many times, if you fail to plan, you will fail. So planning becomes important. And that's where we have a resource on our website, which is a planning document that looks a bit like this. Well, should look a bit like that. There we go. And this document, I kind of live by, because it gets us sorting ourselves out as test data engineers and managing the projects. We convene a team. The team is going to be people that are going to do the masking, people that can help us understand the relationships in the database, our project or product owners who look after our best interests. It involves information security, because they give us input into what the organization defines as PII data, corporate confidential data, protected health. Is anybody in healthcare in here? No, okay. So you convene the team and you start to talk about what is PII data. So let's ask the question. What's the first thing you think of PII? Personally identifiable information.
Yeah. Just like my name or my birthday.
Thank you. Yeah. Name, date of birth. Anything else?
Address.
Sorry? Address, yeah. Anything else?
Bank account number?
Bank account isn't PII. No. No, it's not. It's that which identifies what GDPR calls a natural person, a living person, that with a heartbeat. And the reason it's natural person is that a person can also be a corporation in law. So, natural person. Who are you? Right. What's your date of birth? What's your national identification number? Where do you live? How do I contact you? What's your gender identity or sexual orientation? Do you have any disabilities? Do you have any court orders or earnings attachments or union affiliations? These things that we can use to triangulate back to a person. So we're thinking that all the time. And what happens is we then decide, what are we going to do with it? So the planning document itself leads us through convening a team, which is sort of there. These guys are the customers. They're involved. They are part of the team. They have to be. Info security is there to guide us, obviously, but there's a double edge to that, because info security plugs back up to CXO level to say, they're doing this. They're doing it right. This is going to protect the business. So everybody gets involved in it along the way. What you then do is, having identified the PII data, you state clearly in Dutch, in English, and whatever, this is what we're going to do when we see it. And it's at this point that you start to think, what am I going to replace this data with, and how am I going to do it? Okay, and from this point onwards then, we need to discover what our data is, understand its structure, its format, engineer what we're going to use to replace it, and then instrument the masking plan itself. So actually using tools like DATPROF Privacy are pretty straightforward, as you'll mostly all know. What we end up doing is, if I can zoom in a bit, you don't necessarily have to follow this specific format, but you will have done a discovery on your database, and you'll list the tables and the columns and the kind of data that it is, what you're going to do with it. And there's an element of dependency that you have to consider as well as you're evolving these projects, but that's part of the training that we do. This is a test data engineer project problem. Before I joined DATPROF, I did a consultancy for a very large travel agency in the UK. And my job was to identify all the PII in the database, understand its relationships, instrument the masking project, validate it, deliver it. And as I was going down the database, you come across tables like, this is a copy of a table that's got PII in it. Because some developer at some point dived into the database in production and said, I need to make a copy of the customer table now, and he made a hot backup of it in production. And it gets copied down the line. So junkyard, you've got to clean it up. You have practices in place to do that. The other thing that people tend not to think of is log files and audit tables, things like that. In the same project I mentioned, I found an audit table that had been around since the inception of the application 13 years beforehand. It was 500 gigabytes in size. So you're doing all of the discussions with people, do you use this log file, audit file? No. Talk to QA, no. Talk to ops, no. So I snuck in a truncate statement, truncate table, audit table, and that 500 gig just disappeared. But it wasn't just the 500 gig in that one copy, it was being copied 8 ways down the line. So 4 terabytes of space. So this is all part of test data engineering as well, and it's an ongoing task because people will still sneak in behind you and put stuff in that database that you don't want to have in there, you don't want to deliver. Okay? So, we're now at the point where we need to start to bring data together. We know names, dates of birth, national identification numbers, address type information. Much of this is provided within DATPROF Privacy, and you'll likely have seen it. But we do need to sometimes go and make our own, or resource in our own as well. So we deliver a set of comprehensive replacement data and generators, if you will. That one there doesn't come with a tool, user-defined replacement content. That's mine. I made it. That's me, test data engineering, for the various things that I do for a living. So what we'll be doing is we're going to have a look at some of these replacement files and maybe look at how we can add to them for things that are specific to us. Now, what I'm going to do is to start to toggle between the PowerPoint presentation now and DATPROF Privacy and having a look at some of the functions that are in there. If any of you have any questions as we go along, then please do interrupt. Okay? So this is what we deliver out of the box. If you look in my own C files here, this is that in here. I've got a vast, I call it vast, a big array of replacement content, which is not within DATPROF Privacy. They are a mix of CSV files and text files. And as examples, notes. You remember me saying we talk with our end users, our customers, and we get an idea of the kind of content that they want. And it's got to be of varying interest. It must not refer to a natural person, and it must not contain anything that's valid PII data. This happens to have a bit of an American context. Okay, so we'll be building files like this. And the way that it works then is that we reference them within DATPROF Privacy using a concept called a seed file. So it's down at the bottom here, value from seed file. And then we just go and choose the seed file that we want, and it will use that randomly and replace it from there. Okay. Now, also within that set of files, there are what are multi-column or correlated replacement content. Sometimes you need stuff that's joined up. A town with a postcode with a province or state, for instance. It all has to fit. What you don't want to end up with is disparate information in your masked content, because it then looks broken. The data integrity doesn't look right. So you're trying to make it look and feel as accurate as possible. It could be things like, and I think Bert might show you later on, a correlated file of a name and a gender. It could be a reference number and a description, which has to match. So you can pull related information into the same row of your replacement content of your database. So there are two different approaches that we have here. One's called the multi-column seed file, and the other one is a simple seed file. Okay. Now, one of the things that we've fetched in over the last few months is a new generator which does date generation. Dates, there are a couple of different ways of handling them within the tool, one of which is very useful for dates of birth. That's to set a date field to the first of the month and year in which the date actually is. Now, the reason that you do that sort of thing for a date of birth is that you retain the age demographic of the database. Age gives us risk, age gives us eligibility. So we're conscious that we don't want to change the demographic of age within a database. So when we're doing the date of birth item, there is a very, very simple tactic, which looks like this, date of birth, where you just set it to a day in the same month and year in which the person was, in this case, born as a date of birth. Okay. The sequential generator is more practical in the data generation role, which Bert will touch on later on, because I'm only on masking. And it allows you to, for instance, spin up transactions and sequence the dates within bounds that you choose, as you can see with the configuration options. So good for spinning up big transaction files, things like that, for the volume experience. There are some new names data sets as well. Those of you that may have used DATPROF Privacy will know that we have gender-specific name sets originally. Now we've extended it so that you can have a first name. It doesn't matter if it's male or female. I don't care. I just want a name, a first name. Or I just want a full name. For instance, we're masking our vendor content. We might change the company name, more on that in a bit. And we have a vendor contact name. It's not like first name, last name, it's just a full name. So we've brought together those sets to be able to do that as well. And the way that works is, we'll use this field here, to generate, and from the generators themselves, we'll choose a full name, let's say, and we have the language packs. Now, these language packs, you may or may not be familiar with, we can add to them if we want to. I have an example, if I was to be doing a full name, a last name rather. you'll see here there's a USG. So this is US English. This is what all these come with the tool. But that one's a copy. That one lives within my seed files up here, last names, and it's just a copy. If you follow the file naming convention, which is in this case last hyphen names underscore something, you can instrument your own replacement content into the tool. So it's there, part of the pick list. One example I do have is on companies. One of my customers is a large global law practice, and they have the better part of 85,000 client companies on their books. So we needed a fairly big set of replacement company names. So I'm interviewing the client. Tell me about your company names. What kind of things do we have? Because a company name's normally a word or a couple of words, and normally then a suffix like limited, partnership, whatever it might be. Okay, says I. Let's talk about what the suffixes are. So whilst I was talking to them, I generated a list. Hopefully you can just about see that. Okay, so I thought that's fine. That's what they see in their databases. Within DATPROF Privacy, there is also a function which is a random word. So this is dictionary words. So if I take one word and another word and append one of those suffixes, I'm getting myself some company names here, which are going to be genuinely random, but they're going to be usable and credible. So this is where DATPROF generation capability, scenario, if you will, comes into play. So if I come to here, what I did was I just created a simple table with one column in it, and I used what's called the generator expression. Now, the generator expression is a method of bringing together the various DATPROF generators and text as well. And it's driven by simply saying $, and then you can choose the generator and configure it accordingly. So all I did was say $random word, wherever random word's gone, there, and that puts another word in. So we can use the generation capability in DATPROF Privacy to engineer our own replacement content. And what I did there was I said, I want 2.5 million rows, please. So we ended up with a fairly big file, no getting away with it. But it ended up being quite useful. And the file content itself looked like this when it was finished. Now, sometimes bringing two words together randomly can bring a smile to your face. This dictionary has been sanitized, so it's not going to offend anybody from a race, religion, sexual orientation perspective at all. And you can add your own if you wanted to as well. Okay? Remember, in all instances and everything you see with DATPROF Privacy, it's user extensible. Bring in your own data. We actively encourage you to do that. Why? You're going to deliver something that's credible and usable. So where am I going there? Well, with this masking planning, we've decided what we're going to do. We're talking to our users. We end up engineering our data content. We end up bringing it together, and we give ourselves replacement content, which is usable and credible. As I say, it looks, feels, smells, touches, and tastes just like the real database itself. The correlated sets, here's an example. This is one for our Canadian clients. This is a list of all, as you see, town, province, postcode, Latin long. So when we are pulling together a correlated data set of some sort, let's say on locations, the way that we do that is use the seed file, which is a multi-column seed file in this case. We choose the file, and then we can choose what elements we want to replace with what element in the seed file, whatever it may be. Why? Again, it's all about credibility. Now, question for you. One of the things that we do within the masking anonymization process is to determine, here, deterministic masking, to use a technique which delivers something consistent. Has anybody used deterministic masking in the room? Okay, yeah, Gerard, you're allowed to say that. Okay. Deterministic masking is one of the things that helps us deliver data integrity. So if we have a last name in table A and the same last name in table B and the same last name in database B, which may or may not be on the same platform, one could be on Oracle, one could be on SQL Server, what we want to try to do is to consistently replace a value. So there are a variety of techniques within DATPROF Privacy to do that. The first one is this deterministic masking. So it's salt key driven, it is irreversible, and what basically happens is that it takes the start value, whatever it may be, and let's say in this case last name. It applies the salt key, and there's a top level salt key at the deployment level as well, at the project level. And what that means is that if we see a Smith, it'll consistently become something, let's say Jones. If we do it on this table or another table, on this database or another database. So that maintaining the data integrity, that's the first step that we take, is to use deterministic masking. Sometimes that doesn't do the job for us all the time. So we also have the ability to leave behind translation tables, before and after sort of images, which we can use to our advantage to do data synchronization. And all of this is thought through and planned in the data masking planning itself. But I did want to highlight that deterministic masking. It's proven very useful since we introduced it a couple of years ago. We were going on and we were exploring the junkyard. We've added in our own things. I've shown you the generator expression. I've shown you the multi-column C files that I wanted to do. There's one other new feature within DATPROF Privacy, and that's the fact that you can now count rows. It's useful to understand what you're dealing with. So the way that this works is very, very simple. Choose all the tables, or choose the table that you're interested in, and count rows. Now, that's not going to work because my database isn't up, so I'm going to get an error on that one in a short while. But that's the methodology that you use to do it. And that will then get the focus on, here's my big ones, here's the ones I've got no rows in, so therefore I'm not interested in them. There we go. And that leads me to the end of the presentation, believe it or not. We're nicely early, but hopefully what I've done is show you something that you've not seen before, or told you about something that you've not seen before. I'm getting nods, which is always good. Hopefully the people on Catch-Up TV being recorded will also agree with us there as well. Thanks for your time. Hopefully you've picked up something that you didn't know before about DATPROF Privacy. Lots of nods. Thank you.